Welcome to the Employment Services Show podcast. I am your host, Rana Kodahi, and I would love to welcome my special guest, Chad Hookey. Now, Chad has over 20 years experience in senior management, working in a combination of retail, employment services, and NDIS services. Some of his recent achievements is he has managed successful reallocation in business shares from underperforming competitors as they were the highest performing sites in the region. He also had the budget of controlling the budget and the P&Ls for 5 sites across Western Sydney, equating to around $1 million in revenue, as well as managing contracts with over 2,000 participants and 50 staff. So you can imagine why I'm excited to have him here today, sharing with us all of his wealth and knowledge. Thank you, Chad.
Thanks for the introduction, Rana, and great to be here. I'm glad I can present on your podcast.
I'm excited to have you. So I'm going to go straight into my first question. Now, I am aware that you have the proven ability to get the best out of your team in regards to performance. I mean, I've seen it firsthand working alongside you a few years ago. So what is your strategy, Chad?
Firm believer of this old saying, you give an inch and they'll take a mile. I believe it's quite opposite with staff, to be honest. I think if you give an inch, you'll gain a mile, particularly if they're in a well-supported work environment. And particularly, we're experiencing that right now with COVID-19, expecting roles to change and at times over and above their general duties. And there hasn't been an issue, and I believe it's contributes a lot to the fact that, you know, I'm quite flexible. I also like staff to work on their own personal brand. I think that's important. It's good for them to reflect on how they wish to be perceived by others. Additionally, have time for them. A lot of people say they have an open door policy. I think an open door policy is not necessarily what's expected. It's not the 2 minutes availability for staff. It's probably more having time for them when it really matters, and it's not at every instance that they need your attention. And then I think being transparent with targets. There's a fine line between motivating someone and demotivating them through targets. So I believe that's what creates a good team, and it's been demonstrated with my guys.
I love how you said you do the opposite from take an inch and they'll take a mile. Is that the old saying?
Yeah. You say it about kids generally. You say you give them an inch and they'll take a mile. I think it's the complete opposite with staff. You give them an inch and you gain a mile. Yeah.
And I like how you said help them work with their personal brands, because some employers feel threatened to help people with their personal brands because they think, okay, you know, they might leave or someone else is going to take them from me. But I think if you're a great leader, it does not matter who comes along and tells them, you know, I've got a better offer. They're always going to stick. Most of the time, they will stick by you as well.
I believe so. I think you're right.
So I want to talk about workplace culture. Now, what are some of the do's and don'ts in creating an excellent workplace culture?
I touched on before, I think being transparent and create a workplace where anyone can voice their concerns with anything. I think having an open, transparent workplace is important. I think finding each individual's passion is highly important. Simon Sinek talks about the why. I more put it as your passion and trying to extract and create a work environment where they can blossom and exercise their passion for their job. I think celebrating milestones, any excuse to create fun and bring enjoyment to the workplace is always a good thing. And I think sometimes we don't share or celebrate key milestones. That could even be someone 2 years with your team. It can be as little as something like that, or as big as someone being 10 years with your organization. It all needs to be celebrated. I think a lot of managers compare to themselves as well. I think it's important not to compare to yourself, because people have not necessarily walked your path. It's not relatable all the time to compare to yourself and your experience. And I think it's not a fair measurement for them to aim up against their manager. So I try not to compare with my experiences so much and talk about their experience. And then just accept the fact that each staff member will have a different ability and reason, they come to the table. And it's really trying to draw on those strengths and express those strengths so that other team members understand what an individual strength may be and why they may not be as successful in some area. I think that's important as well.
I love what you said about finding their passion. At the same time, I love what you said is the thing that stood out to me, which I've never heard I've never ever heard in all of kind of leadership, is comparing the individual to yourself. Because sometimes you compare their abilities to yourself, especially if you're a high achiever, and sometimes you kind of get frustrated, like, why are they not, don't they have a sense of urgency or things like that? And it's definitely important to take a step back and realize that they're walking their own path as well.
That's exactly right. And, each personal circumstance is potentially a reason why they may not have the urgency you have or whatever it may be. So I think that's highly important.
Yeah.
Just not to compare to yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. All right. I want to ask now, I'm curious, like, I know that you've coached many people I'm guessing you've coached many people that were afraid to sell and market either their job seekers themselves or the educational services that you offer. How were you able to help them, or what advice can you give to someone who is afraid to go out there and market?
Oh, I think the first thing is failure is not failure in the true sense of the word. Sales is a numbers game, and failure is part of the process. So I think people need to not be concerned about failing. As I say, it's a numbers game. You need to fail in order to succeed in sales, I believe. But I think the biggest thing and the one main conversation that I have with staff is around being a pain point solution. So looking at an employer, understanding their workplace, understanding some of their pain points and coming in with a solution. And a solution isn't always putting someone in a job. We do that in the community space as well. We spend a long time ensuring that we understand people's pain points and can come up with solutions that don't exactly, aren't measured on our bottom line all the time, but I believe it strengthens a partnership, and then in future, you can start to address your agenda. I think working off their agenda and their pain point is your first option. And then obviously taking training, and, you run successful training sessions. I think that's important. I think people need to invest in their own futures, and by through an employer or even individually, and doing training like yours that really simplifies and breaks down the sales process. People are a little scared to take the leap, and funny enough, they don't realize how great they may actually be as a salesperson because they need to just try. So yeah, that's always my take on sales and my feedback with staff.
Yeah, and I mean, you gave some great advice, and what I kind of heard from you is, number one, don't be afraid to fail. Number two, understand the pain points and solutions of the employer. And I love what you said about a solution isn't always about putting someone into a job.
No.
I love that. Like, I've never even heard that, and all the years that I've been running training or in the industry. So let's just talk about a solution isn't about helping someone, just about getting someone a job. Like, what kind of other solutions could there be, hypothetically, to give someone an example who's listening right now?
A lot of the times we've actually brokered partnerships where we're literally the conduit between the two organizations. So at many times, if I want to talk mainly in the community space, there's organizations that may require upskilling of their participants. So we've linked them with RTOs. It can be in the sense that an employer needs to understand the JobKeeper payment, particularly at the moment. So we were a resource to those employers and broke down the JobKeeper payment. As I say, it doesn't always have to be a placement. Sometimes employers aren't after a staff member; they're after resources, and I think it's in our duty that we should inform employers of new concepts or new financial gains for employers. So yeah, I think it's highly important that we don't always just focus on placing someone in a job.
Yeah, and what you've highlighted there is something in sales that we call acts of service and value adding. And acts of service are not necessarily about selling right now. It's about just adding the value, building that relationship, nurturing it. And then eventually you could be the go-to person when they do have that need or that pain point, because they're going to obviously go to that person that was there for them, that was helping them. I love how you guys helped employers with, job keeper information and all that, adding value, because eventually they're going to remember you when they do come out. And many of them are going to come out, or they are going to have jobs in different places if they were in recruitment or HR. And yeah, so I love Dale Carnegie. I always say his name wrong. I used to say his name Dale Carnegie, and everyone's like, no, it's Dale Carnegie. So one of my favorite books is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And when I went to your profile, I was doing some research about you before I got you on this podcast, and I noticed that you have completed the Dale Carnegie training, which is basically a worldwide recognized course in leadership in sales and personal development. Now, I would love for you to share with our listeners some key learnings that you took away from this program.
The number one thing I took away was create an environment where people can express their feelings, ideas, and passion. That was probably the one thing. And we simulated a workplace with high energy. Quite awkward at the start, I'll be honest. But it was amazing to see the ideas and, the entrepreneurs in the room that really came out and started to share their ideas, because we created a workplace. We broke down the stigma around, if I speak out, how will I be perceived? Well, when we're all standing in a room screaming at each other, we really broke down the barriers around awkwardness. So that was one major lesson I learned. I took that back to the teams and I said, guys, we need to let our hair down. We need to relax and feel that we can talk about our feelings, but also it creates ideas. And that was probably the key takeaway. It creates creativity. I think most answers lie with your staff and not with management. And if you allow them to express their ideas and support their ideas, whether providing business excellence or not, I think it's highly important that they feel that they can discuss those things. And the old saying, not planning is planning to fail. So there was a big focus on planning. But the number one thing I took away from that is create an environment where people feel comfortable to talk about their ideas. And we simulated that. And I tell you, it was quite awkward to start with, but everyone at the end of it was I'm sure took that away and simulated or put that into their own workplace. So yeah, it was great. It was an amazing course.
I love what you said. I mean, there was so much to take away. I created an environment where people can share their purpose, ideas, and passions. I was writing notes when you were talking. Share our hearts. Or I think you said, let our hair down and talk about our feelings. But what I love the most, what you said, and this should be a slogan. I think you should write this on your LinkedIn after I finish with you. I dare you. I give you this challenge. Okay. What you said is, most of your answers lay with your staff and not with your management. That's brilliant. I love what you said there. If you don't share it, I'm going to write it and then tag you as your quote. But if you do share it, send me the link and I'll share it. I'll let it go out, because that's such an important point. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of the answers do lay with their staff, the ones that are on the front line doing this job every day. They have more experience than you, because maybe you haven't done it for a few years, or maybe you've never done this job, so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer of that as well. Let them express their ideas, and most of the time the ideas you move forward with are those of your staff. So yeah, firm believer of that.
Okay, so I'm going to go to my second last question. I want to ask you, now I ask this question often and I always get different answers, and I love asking very similar questions and just the diversity of answers that I get. Now, if you could go back to when you first started your career, it doesn't matter, in retail, employment service, whatever, in your career as a leader, or even not as a leader, just in general, what advice would you give to your less experienced self?
It's an interesting question. To be honest, and this probably goes against many people's mantra on a career built on stability, but I think I valued stability too high. I think it disabled me in some senses from moving to different career pathways. I've been with two employers for 20 years. I understand that looks great on the open market. Not that necessarily that's the purpose for long tenure in an employment, but I'm a firm believer that I probably could have taken a few additional steps in order to break that stability, because it potentially stunted my growth. That's probably one thing I'd say to myself back in the day is as much as I've been promoted through two organisations and I've hit senior management, who knows what the ceiling could have been if I probably didn't value stability so much. Which probably goes against what a lot of people say, but it's probably a reflection on my career anyway.
That's quite interesting. I've never actually heard that one before, but it does make sense. You have been with your first job, you were there for 10 years. Now with your second employer, another 10 years. So, and it is rare to find people or to meet people that have been in a job more than nowadays, especially in our generation. I think people move around. So I guess that's a good thing at the same time, but at the same time, because people strive in certainty, but also you need uncertainty to thrive and grow as well.
Yeah, and that pushes you to challenge yourself, I guess. So it's not that I haven't had challenges, and it's not that I'm probably at a point in my life where stability is most important to me, to be honest. I'm looking back at my younger self and thinking maybe that wasn't necessarily always the best career pathway for myself. But again, I'm quite proud to say that I've also worked for two employers for 20 years as well. So there's pros and cons.
Absolutely. I mean, that is a great achievement. And that shows that you are a loyal and committed person as well.
I think so. And I think stability is more important now than what it ever has been. But like I say, if I looked at my younger self, maybe that would be some advice I'd give myself.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Now, my last question, I want to know what motivates, because I know you are, as I said, I've met you, I've kind of worked with you when you were coaching your team. And I do know that you have high standards and you always aim for excellence. So what motivates you to want to achieve excellence?
Look, I personally think making a difference in people's lives, and I'm talking about your employees, your staff, not necessarily just the people that you service through your programs. I think that's highly important. It motivates me to keep doing better, seeing staff grow and move into other opportunities. You can kind of hang your hat on that and say, I assisted that person with their development. That's a real motivator for me. But also business development. I like to reflect on the previous 12 months and say, where were we then and where are we now? And that's a bit of a personal achievement to know that we've grown the business, or particularly a patch that I may be managing. That most definitely motivates me. So performance is a key thing, but I think get your people right and look after them and do the right thing by your people, and performance takes care of itself. So I really focus heavily on staff and people development. And not everybody wants to succeed and become, not succeed, but not everybody wants to become a manager. And that's okay. We need people in our business that don't necessarily want to become managers. But there's still room for growth, and we can still grow those people and support them with their journey. So I think my main motivator and my key drive for every day is really to help my staff and ensure that, we're building a career pathway for them, albeit management or not. So that's my main motivator and main driver.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you said about, it's not just obviously you want to make a difference for your customers, but you also, maybe even your customers are really the staff, like you are serving them in a sense, and making a difference and watching them grow and progress. And at the same time, it's not always, if they don't want to progress and they're comfortable to stay in that position, and that's fine too as well. Well, I know that anyone that you manage or you lead is quite lucky to have you. If I was ever going to go back to the workforce, I would love to have a manager like you as well. So
thanks, Rana. I appreciate that. And I think managers are spoken of about like that in regards to if their key focus is people development. A lot of people will work for a manager. Some people will stay in a job for their manager. So I think you've got a responsibility. If you want to take the manager's cap and wear it, then you have a responsibility to look after your staff. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, so that brings us to the end of this podcast. I have no doubt whoever listened to it has gotten a wealth of knowledge, whether it was a staff member, a leader, an employer. So thank you so much once again for your time.
Thank you, Rana.
Have an amazing week.
Will do. Thank you.
Actually, no, one more question. I was about to ask you. Okay, so where can people reach you if they need to get in? Is that your LinkedIn? Do they just look you up on LinkedIn? Because just say they have a question for you, etc. And I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, of course. LinkedIn, Messenger, or email. I've got my details on my LinkedIn page as well and phone number. So yeah, by all means, I'm happy to liaise. As we say, you can never have enough networks. So I'm happy for people to reach out if need be.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Chad.
Thanks, Rana.